Hello everyone. Sorry this video has been a little late in the coming, but you probably, if you follow me on Twitter, you know I've had quite a busy summer. I'm hopeful to get these things back on track. I have a huge list of videos that I'd like to do, but if you have any ideas or questions or ones you'd like me to focus on, do send me an email to alex@alexandrasnow.com. So with 50 Shades of Grey coming out next year, the movie, I've noticed that there's a lot of popular discussion and misconceptions about BDSM and fetishism and female dominance. Not just female dominance, but dominance and submission. And these are all three very distinct and very separate topics. So I'm going to briefly cover them, and then maybe in later videos we'll talk about them more in depth. And you're probably like, oh, what do you mean? They're not all the same? No, they are absolutely not the same. No more than, well, I can say that, well, an apple and a banana and a kumquat are all fruits. You certainly don't cook them the same way, eat them the same way, or, well, put them in the same kind of recipes, right? First, BDSM. Contrary to popular belief, dominance and submission is not the D and the S in BDSM. BDSM stands for bondage, discipline, sadism, and masochism. It is a catch-all term for the four most common subsects of the physical element of play. Bondage, obviously, being, restraining a partner. Discipline being the physical application of something unpleasant, not necessarily just pain. Discipline could be like having to kneel on rice. Okay, that's a form of discipline, but it's more commonly things like spanking or flogging or caning. Then there's sadism, which is receiving joy from implementing pain, okay, so inflicting pain upon someone, and masochism, which is receiving joy or pleasure from receiving pain. These things are very much an activity-based concept. Yes, we can do things like mental bondage, right? Like things, hypnosis and whatnot. But bondage is the act of actually being restrained or restraining someone. You can't do these things without a partner, obviously. So discipline is the act of actually inflicting discipline, right? That brings me to the next one, fetishism. Fetishism is very specific, and more people have an interest in fetishism than they realize. Fetishism is having an arousal from something very specific, like a specific item, an object, or from a very specific situation. It also could be a very specific body part, although that's considered to be partialism. So if, say, someone has a hand fetish or has a foot fetish, right? Or, breasts or, butt or legs or any of those things. But it's not just, I like that thing. It's that specific thing brings a form of arousal for you. As a Dom, I have to understand fetishism when it connects with BDSM and where it doesn't connect with BDSM, because there are lots of people who say, I'm really not into pain at all, but I really like feet. Well, that's great. I really like my feet too, and I enjoy the whole aspect of having my feet worshipped, right? Well, it's not the foot in and of itself, although that is part of the fetishism. It's because it's my foot and because of the situation around it, etc. So these things are not cut and dry. So fetishism could be wearing a type of clothing. Someone who has a latex fetish, for example. Just the look of latex can bring apart, an arousal. Doesn't mean that all latex or, all feet or all, satin panties do it, or even them just like laying there. It's usually very specific and has a very specific situation to it. Very, very, very common. If you're thinking to yourself, I am so weird because I like X, Y, and Z, trust me, you're not. Most people have one type of fetish or another, and certain fetishes are much more common than others, such as, foot fetish is the oldest and most common type of fetish. Bondage is pretty much the second. Oh, I see there I used mixed BDSM and fetishism together. It's because these things are all more interrelated than we like to admit, but they are just separate concepts. So, carrying on. Dominance and submission. Okay, like I said before, the D and S in BDSM doesn't actually have anything to do with dominance and submission. Dominance and submission is more about personalities and roles, and usually can have absolutely nothing to do with play and can have everything to do with play. It really depends on the people involved. A dominant person is not someone who is really good at their jobs or, anything else. A dominant person is literally someone who enjoys taking on the dominant role, whether it's for the duration of the scene or whether it's for, their entire lives. And we usually call lifestyle dominant people who all of their relationships are dominant relationships. Like, for example, myself, I'm a lifestyle dominant. This is not a better or worse or anything else thing, because legitimately being a lifestyle dominant is not an easy thing, as is being a lifestyle submissive. You actually have to have another person, to play with in those situations in order to have that part of you fulfilled. Conversely, the submissive part. Submission is just the act of being submissive for, say, the scene, or it could be, inside a relationship. It could have very specific parameters, or it could be the entire relationship. There are people who feel the need to be submissive so much that they would consider themselves slaves and would like to be owned and, treated as a piece of property, and not as just having a desire to submit under certain circumstances. So these three concepts, you can see that they are different, but when I say related, so in BDSM, often people fantasize about being dominated by someone like, say, me. But they don't think about me telling them, okay, now get over there and scrub out my toilet, although that's certainly a legitimate, type of fantasy. But they usually think about, being bound and then being spanked, or, being made to endure certain things, right? And that's their form of feeling submission. Everyone gets there a little differently. Some people like to have very elaborate psychodramas, right? Where it's a big fancy role play and there's lots of costumes and lots of outfits and everything. That's great. And some people, just the act of coming in and knowing that she's a dominant woman does all of it for you, and you feel very submissive already. There's lots of stuff on the internet when people talk about, men are visual creatures and women are emotional creatures and stuff. And yes, in science, these things are true, but it's not black and white when it comes to fetishism, right? So yes, does the look sometimes have a lot to do with it, i.e. in fetishism, where, a woman wearing a leather outfit makes the person feel submissive? Sure, but it's only because these things are connected in our sexualities, not because they're the same. I will wrap this up with one final thought on sexuality. No matter how weird you feel, no matter how bizarre you think your fetish is, trust me, there's someone out there who has an even more bizarre fetish. In fact, it's not just one person, it's usually a whole community of people. Your fetishes are as normal as the entire range of human sexuality, because they have to do with human sexuality. Just because our community and our society tells you that it's not okay for you to fantasize about, being spanked, doesn't mean that it's not normal. In fact, it's very, very normal. The reason why there's an entire industry of, of fetish and BDSM, websites is because there's obviously a huge market for it, right? Why are there websites like FetLife? Why are there websites like, Alt and Bondage and things like that? Because there are lots of people out there like you. But a lot of people who are really scared to, to even talk about it. I mean, do you go to your best friend and say, yeah, I kind of like to get spanked on Friday nights? Of course not, because people don't understand. Now with things like 50 Shades of Grey coming out, people start to talk about it a little more. This stuff happens every, 5-10 years. But nobody is really super understanding of it, which comes down to my job. Part of my job, in fact, most of my job, is just not judging people. I truly think that everybody's fetishes are completely acceptable as long as you're not doing harm to other people or to yourself, right? But it's because I have all the data. I studied sexual behavior psychology. I can actually tell you that according to all the statistics, you're pretty much as normal as they come. Now me, I'm just a total pervert. I can't really say anything, right? I love all this other stuff. But it doesn't mean that one thing's better or worse. Accept you for who you are, right? And that's my job, is to literally accept these other people for exactly who they are, and for you for who you are, and understand you, and understand the things that get you going, because it's all part of that human experience too.